I thought about doing a long introduction to this video talking about, remember when a game captured your attention from the moment you pressed the start? Who cares? Let's just jump straight into the list. Welcome to Crosscuts, the series where we jump between multiple games to analyze the biggest mechanics and trends of gaming. My name is Mr. Supercut, and today we are looking at the greatest intros, or the best intros in gaming history. Cast your minds back to 2007, when if you wanted to purchase a video game, you had to physically enter a game store, and you could still access a Blockbuster to rent any game or movie your heart desired. When I was young enough to be blissfully unaware of entitled game journalists, political agendas in video games, and the only reference point I ever had for a game was the back of its case. So, when picking up Assassin's Creed for the first time, and the only reference point I have is this, you can imagine my surprise when I boot up the game for the first time and am greeted with this. Why does my game, that's supposed to be set in the 12th century, look like I'm in the future? Why does my very first experience of gameplay look like I'm inside Tron and not Lawrence of Arabia?
You okay?
I told you he'd be fine.
You bastards!
Now, I just saved your life.
Saved my life? You kidnapped me. You strapped me into that thing.
Animus. It's an animus.
Wait. What? Again, in 2026, we all know how the Assassin's Creed games work. You're strapped into an animus and can access your ancestors' genetic memories through your DNA. However, in 2007, when the only information I had to go on was the back of the case, I was almost convinced that Blockbuster had put the wrong game in the case. This setup was one of the greatest bait and switches in all of gaming, and even though the current state of Assassin's Creed is far from perfect, the series will always hold a special place in my heart for what it managed to achieve in the first game's introduction. Some games come with a tutorial. Outlast comes with a warning label. The intro starts before the game even begins, right there in the menu screen. As you can see, there's no easy mode. Your first decision is picking between normal, hard, nightmare, and insane. It tells you that if you die, you go all the way back to the beginning. Permadeath at its most brutal. And just before you commit, a message pops up. This is the ultimate heart attack experience. Are you ready to suffer? And then, like the game is taunting you, it forces you to click yes. This isn't just difficulty selection. Get your helmets because this is psychological warfare. The tone has been set from the get-go. This is not a game that you win, this is a game that you survive, and barely. The next screen gives you a short wall of text, equal parts horrifying as it is intriguing. It forces you to want to continue, simultaneously making you regret having picked it up in the first place. Outlast contains intense violence, gore, graphic sexual content, and strong language. Please enjoy. You are Miles Upshaw, an investigative reporter whose ambition is about to earn him an intimate tour of hell on Earth. Always willing to risk digging into the stories no other journalist would dare investigate, you will seek out the dark secret at the heart of Mount Massive Asylum. Stay alive as long as you can, record everything. You're not a fighter. To navigate the horrors of Mount Massive and expose the truth, your only choices are to run, hide, or die. Before you even step foot into Mount Massive Asylum, you already know exactly what kind of experience you are in for. No guns, no defense, just a camcorder, a rapid drain on your sanity, and the creeping sense that you really shouldn't be here. Uninstall and move on. And yet, you press yes anyway. The game opens to you, Miles, driving your vehicle along a dusty road toward the asylum as a news report drones on in the background and begins to fizzle away as you get closer to your destination. You pull up to the security gate to find nobody around, switch off your lights, and pick up your first piece of intel. It's a printed email from a disgruntled employee blowing the whistle on some heinous crimes happening within the walls of the asylum, and you've turned up armed with some batteries and a camcorder to expose the truth. You step out of the car and are presented with your first objective: investigate Mount Massive Asylum. As you turn around, the gate closes behind you as if someone has intentionally just locked you in, but there's no one on the security checkpoint. However, the camera does seem to be working, so you are definitely being watched. You head toward the side gate and are presented with a horrifying tutorial. The game tells you that you have the ability to open doors very, very slowly. You raise your camcorder as you head to the front entrance and are startled by a creepy figure in one of the windows that disappears just as quickly as it appeared. You notice a flickering light in the distance but can't make it through any of the fences. There are several army trucks parked outside the entrance, but both of the doors are locked. The tension is palpable. You head through a narrow gap in a broken fence, try the door, no luck, then look up to find an open window, so you climb the scaffolding and jump through. With the lights out, you resort to your night vision and very quickly realise on insane mode you can only carry 2 batteries. You only have one, and it's dying very quickly. You leave the room and head across the barricade hallway, making sure to document everything when you press on, squeezing through the narrow gap, and find some blood spattered across the wall. Where is everyone? You move into an office, say a prayer of thanks as you pick up another battery, move into the next office and find some psychiatric intel, and then heading back out you spot some blood-stained boot prints along the floor. As you quietly follow the trail, the slightly ajar door closes as if someone is declining you entry, which means someone is behind that door, which means you are not alone. You realise you need to get out, and get out fast. You move into the only room you can and close the door behind you, jump into the open air vent, and as you move through it, spot a freaky looking crazy barge through the door you just closed. After he leaves, you jump down and realise that you've been locked in. The only way out now is forward. You press on and drop down into the main area, spotting another crazy through the frosted glass on the other side. You head through the nearby door and work your way through a dark maze of bookshelves, headless corpses, and corpseless heads until you come across a dead man impaled on a spike. Only he's not dead, and he warns you of the horrors he and his team have just been exposed to and tells you to get out now. You've been in the asylum for all of 5 minutes and you realise you've already well overstayed your welcome. As if all of that isn't enough, your battery begins to flash red. These things do not last very long at all. As you head out, you see a gargantuan-looking beast heading through a nearby door, and in a wild case of insanity, you attempt to follow. But fortunately for you, it's locked. You press on and realise you need to squeeze through yet another small gap.
Little pig.
And who are you, then?
I see. Merciful God, you have sent me an apostle.
Guard your life, son. You have a calling.
New objective, escape the asylum. Swiftly moving on, 2012, the year of the apocalypse, African warlords, and a little cube head called Gomez. Fez dropped onto the indie scene following in the footsteps of Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac, and helped solidify the idea that indie games should not only be taken seriously, but they were definitely here to stay. I remember it being available on the Xbox 360 marketplace and was one of the first games I bought on my very first gaming PC way back in 2012. Like Assassin's Creed, Fez requires a little bit of additional context for the intro to really stand out, because currently, in 2026, we're spoiled for choice really with the amount of indie games we have available to us. But back in 2012, there weren't that many, and indie games were only just becoming a thing. Of course, Fez doesn't compare to indie games like Minecraft, but when you compare it to Minecraft's first iteration from 2009, I don't know, it definitely feels a little bit more polished. Anyway, the point I want to make is indie games have been around for a little while, but we're just on the verge of taking the world by storm. And in that cultural moment, in drops this little guy called Gomez. If there's one thing that indie games are known for, it's pushing the boundaries of what to expect in video games, and Fez is no exception. Again, I went into Fez completely blind and had no idea about the concept of what was about to unfold. You wake up, notably, without a Fez on your head and head outside. A letter arrives outside your door telling you to meet Giza at the top of the village. So far, nothing to note other than the cute looking art style. I begin climbing upward, speak to some of the locals who drop some weird comments, explore some of the homes, and slowly but surely I make my way to the top of the village and meet Giza. I'd never seen anything like this prior to playing it, and I don't care, I still think it's one of the greatest intros to a game ever. The game itself, hit or miss, but that's not what we're talking about here today. Solid intro, thank you, next. A Monsters Expedition is a game about pushing trees over to make paths between these little islands and learning about the human world through a series of museum artifacts through the eyes of a little monster. Now, you might be wondering why a cute puzzle game has ended up on a list about the best intros in video game history. I will tell you in good time, very soon actually. As you've just seen, the game drops you straight into the world and doesn't bother explaining anything to you because it understands that half the magic of these types of games is figuring everything out for yourself. As you progress further through the maze of small puzzles, you learn a few different mechanics, like jumping into post boxes to quick travel, only being able to push logs, not pull them, the curiosity of seeing human creations through the eyes of a monster, and the fact that you can only walk across a log if it connects the two islands together unless you drop two on top of each other, which creates a platform. And it's with these mechanics in mind that sets up the brilliant introduction. You enter this small island with the intention of getting over to the windmill, and using what you've learned already, it seems straightforward enough. You create a walkway, put the log into position to push it towards the windmill, and your expectations have been subverted, a new mechanic has been learned, and the title card drops, and now we're in a new biome, leaving me desperate to get back to the windmill to see what they didn't want me to see. Absolutely fantastic. Now, if you've been subscribed to the channel prior to June 2025, then you may have seen my supercut of the game Firewatch. If you haven't, then please check it out. It would mean the world to me. If you have, or if you have played the game, then you'll understand why the introduction to Firewatch is absolutely fantastic. The game starts out as a type of choose your own adventure where you essentially get to choose the backstory for your character Henry. The introduction doesn't last very long, but it's one of the most moving moments in gaming I think I've ever played. I probably liken it to the introduction of Up. Whilst there isn't much gameplay involved in the opening sequence and doesn't reflect how the game will unfold as you begin the playthrough, and whilst the choices you make here don't necessarily have an impact on the wider game and surrounding mysteries you uncover throughout the game, the intro definitely sets the tone and mood of the game and does it very, very well. Now, if you've been subscribed to the channel prior to February 2025, then you may have seen my supercut of the game Return of the Obra Dinn. If you haven't, then please let me explain to you why this is one of the best intros and arguably one of the greatest games of all time. There's no action in Return of the Obra Dinn, at least not in the conventional way we've come to understand it. It starts with arguably the most boring sector on the planet: insurance. So 4 years ago, a ship called the Obra Dinn was lost at sea, and all of a sudden it's now resurfaced, and it's your job as Chief Inspector of Insurance Claims to figure out what happened and why. Upon arrival at the Obra Dinn, the ship is completely desolate aside from a single rotting skeleton. After a quick look around, you jump back into the small rowboat that got you here and pull out a book from your belongings. In the book, there's a letter written by a Henry Evans who says that he had every intention of telling the strange tale of what happened those few years before, but with his health failing, he was only able to manage writing the basic outline. He tasks you with two things. Firstly, to use the pocket watch to find out the fates of everyone who was aboard the Obra Dinn, and secondly, to return the book by guaranteed post to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. That's it, that's all you get. The basic outline of the book frames it in a way so you understand the scope and monumental task ahead of you, but leaves so much information out that it's impossible to know where to begin. You put the book away, collect the watch that Evans had referenced, and head back up to the deck. Next to the rotted corpse, you pull out the watch and are transported to a frozen moment in time, showing you how the unknown skeleton died. This is where the penny drops, everything clicks into place, and the intro solidifies itself as one of the GOATs. Before we dive into the analysis, we have to look at the landscape of 2009. The world was still reeling from the impact of The Dark Knight the year before. Heath Ledger's performance hadn't just redefined the Joker, it had redefined what we expected from the entire Batman mythos. We all thought we had a deep understanding of who Batman was and believed we understood what Batman was supposed to be. Then, Rocksteady dropped Arkham Asylum. Most superhero stories end with the hero driving the villain to the gates of the prison. For Arkham Asylum, this was how it started. It takes this happily ever after of a typical superhero story and turns it into this slow, creeping dread. By giving you the victory in the first minute, the game immediately begs the question, if I've already won, what happens to make it go so wrong? The opening sequence sees you as Batman escorting the Joker deeper and deeper into Arkham Asylum, specifically there to ensure nothing goes wrong. There's no combat, no gadgets, no chaos, just the thump of Batman's boots and the Joker's incessant mocking chatter. The tension doesn't build, it suffocates. The brilliance here is how the Joker interacts with the world around him. You watch him taunt the guards and wave at doctors, asserting dominance in a place where he should be completely powerless. You start to share Batman's internal monologue. He's exactly where he wants to be. One of the most unnerving points of the entire sequence is when this gargantuan beast steps out of an elevator, declares,
"I've got your scent, Batman,"
and then threatens to hunt you down and kill you. And as you're playing a game called Arkham Asylum, it's essentially giving you a taste of the nightmare of what's to come. As you step into the lift, the Joker starts to drop chilling hints about how this is all part of a larger, grander scheme, and so understandably, when the lights go out, Batman's first thought is to wrap his fingers around the Joker's throat. Finally, once you've made it deep underground and you've been separated from Joker, he falls to his knees and the chaos begins.
Joker's loose. Alert the warden.
Hurry! We're losing him, Doc!
The joke's on you.
Ta-da!
Honey, I'm home.
Come on in.
Welcome to the madhouse, Batman! I set a trap, and you sprang it gloriously! Now let's get this party started.
Ladies and maniacs.
Before jumping into the game, we have to talk about the skepticism that preceded this game. In 2020, an unknown studio called Game Science dropped a 13-minute gameplay trailer that floored everyone. The combat looked too smooth, the bosses looked too detailed, and the world looked too polished. Essentially, the game looked fun to play, and we'd been let down so many times it felt too good to be true. For years, the Western market had written off Chinese game development as a factory for mobile gacha games. Black Myth Wukong was China's rebuttal. With 6 years of production and a $70 million budget on the line, the studio couldn't afford a slow burn. They needed to grab us by the throat. Where our previous games on the list thrived on quiet tension and atmospheric builds, Wukong rejects that pacing entirely. It doesn't wait for us to get comfortable. The moment we hit start game, it hits the ground running and does not relent for a single second. Watch this. This is an intro with zero hesitation, okay? It tells us that not only are we going to be playing an absolute beast of a monkey, but he has the confidence in and of himself to know that he can take them all on. It sets a massive power gap, giving us a taste of godhood in the first few minutes. So when the game does strip it away, as it always does, which it does very soon after, we spend the next 40 to 50 hours fighting like a madman just to get back to where we started. But it isn't just the scale that makes this work, it's the mechanical payoff as well. Remember that gameplay trailer? It wasn't a black or white, I don't see colour, myth. It was real. Everything we were promised was delivered the second we hit start. Fantastic intro, snubbed at the Game Awards. Moving on. Right, okay, while Sifu is widely recognised for its aging and slick fighting mechanics, the introduction deserves equal attention for its execution of narrative misdirection. If a player goes into this game blind, their expectations are going to be subverted. So, spoilers, obviously. The game opens with a simple caption, 8 years ago. You play as a long-haired protagonist, breach the doors of a dojo, and begin dismantling the soldiers inside. The game uses this sequence to teach fluid combat mechanics. You give it a high-level moveset from the outset, establishing a distinct power fantasy very similar to what Wukong did. As you move through the complex, you encounter dead NPCs and meet up with allied fighters. However, the dialogue and environmental storytelling begin to suggest that something's not quite right. You're not dismantling a villain's lair, you're orchestrating a coordinated raid. Eventually, you come face to face with an old man. You tell your allies to stand down, and then you refer to him as
Sifu. You know why I'm here, don't you? Just step aside.
You were a mistake. I should never have taught you. Now you know too much. By returning here tonight, you've given me a second chance. This time, I will do what I must.
After a brief exchange of hands, the Sifu is killed. It's at this precise moment the perspective shifts. You discover a small child hiding inside a cupboard. The Sifu's child. This is where the game demands a gender selection for the child. Again, raising questions about who you are exactly. Once the choice is made, the leader orders one of his associates to kill the child, and the screen cuts to black. The protagonist you were controlling was not the hero. You were playing the backstory from the perspective of the villain, systematically executing the true protagonist's father. From here, the game transitions into one of the most mechanically efficient opening credit sequences I've ever seen. It functions as a choreographed training montage. The child ages into a young adult, and the sequence systematically introduces you to the 5 assassins who raided the dojo. Rather than a static tutorial, the game isolates each enemy, teaching you a specific defensive or offensive mechanic, dodging, parrying, striking, while stamping the names of your targets on the screen. All of this within the first 10 minutes, an absolute banger of an intro. From the moment you load up the game, even before the opening menu, Cocoon is already building its world. You see a black screen and a loading bar tracking across, made entirely of ancient alien hieroglyphs. The menu loads up, except there's no traditional menu, it's just the title and a simple icon encouraging you to press A, or X, whatever. After pressing A, the title abruptly vanishes. In the exact same scene, a beam of light pelts from the sky at breakneck speed, activating a rocky glyph. This powers up a strange-looking cocoon, revealing a small bug-like creature. You drop to the ground, and the game begins. You run around a little bit, finding your feet. After heading down a set of stairs which close up behind you, forcing you forward, you find a small pad to stand on. There are no on-screen prompts telling you to press any buttons, so you recall the title sequence, Hit A, and lo and behold, the insect presses the pad and reveals a way through. You press on, hitting another pad and opening a gate. Inside is a strange looking ball that, when pulled, reveals a giant platform that appears to be alive. On its head is another pad to press, which causes the giant to jump forward so you can carry on. Next is a short puzzle involving moving platforms, which you solve pretty quickly, getting fully immersed in this vibrant biomechanical environment with floating living balloons down below. You scale a cliff face, find a large gate that won't open, head up a nearby hill, and get barricaded in. You uncover a secret pad, and this is where the game pulls the rug completely out from underneath you. You press A, a button you've comfortably used a dozen times by now to open doors or platforms, but this time you are yeeted completely out of the world. The camera zooms out, and you realize that the massive living landscape you were just exploring is actually contained entirely inside a tiny orange orb, very much like that one Rick and Morty episode. You're greeted by a monstrous creature who flies straight into the world you just left, and suddenly the scale of the game completely shatters. You pick the orb up on your back. You're now carrying an entire universe around a stark, cold mechanical fortress that is completely devoid of life and colour. You use the world you just came from to power bridges and solve puzzles that steadily increase in difficulty. After picking up a small flying companion, you find the final resting place for the orb. You slot it into a mechanism surrounded by water, press A, and seamlessly dive right back into the universe you were just carrying. That little flying creature you picked up on the outside grants you access through the barricade and kindly opens the massive door that blocked you earlier. This leads you across a chasm into an area with some nasty looking enemies, and eventually your very first boss fight. This all happens within the first 15 minutes of the game. It is a masterful manipulation of scale and expectations, and I highly suggest picking this game up and giving it a whirl. You won't be disappointed from beginning to the end. Stellar intro, time for the next one. You'll find a lot of these intros for me start before you leave the menu, and Far Cry 5 is no exception. As you load in, the soundtrack begins to play, and it's so atmospheric and so nostalgic to listen to that it's actually one of my favourite game soundtracks of all time. But once you finally bring yourself to hit start, the peaceful soundtrack fades out and you're thrown into a sequence that quickly yet masterfully builds the tension. It opens with a gritty interview-style sequence. You're watching a montage of interviews with locals and whistleblowers talking about the project at Eden's Gate, which quickly escalates into violence. It's a fantastic piece of world building, and it transitions seamlessly as the camera pans back to reveal you're actually watching this exact video on a tablet sitting in the back of a helicopter. You're a rookie deputy flying into the heart of the cult's compound to serve an arrest warrant to their leader, Joseph Seed, along with the Hope County Sheriff and an FBI agent. The descent into the compound is unbearably sinister. As you step out of the chopper, you're forced to walk through a gauntlet of heavily armed, dead-eyed cultists who all know why you're there. At this point, you don't know how deep their loyalties lie for the self-proclaimed prophet. Will they step in to defend him, or will they flee as we take him to jail? The tension is palpable. Every step feels like you're walking deeper into the devil's throne room, ironically taking place inside a church, and nobody is pulling any punches about how bad of an idea this actually is. You breach the church, and there he is. Joseph Seed, calm and collected, with his disciples blocking the path through, and his brothers and sisters standing behind him. You wait with bated breath for the bullets to start tearing you to pieces, but they never come. In fact, the strangest thing happens instead. Not only does the prophet not resist, but he willingly offers himself to you, emulating, almost mocking how Christ willingly went to the cross. The game forces you to make the move. It waits for you to step forward and put the cuffs on him yourself.
Sometimes the best thing to do is to walk away.
Let's go.
As you head back to the helicopter, the air gets thick with tension and your blood pressure starts to rise. It's at the very last moment when you think you've just gotten free.
Get back! Get the fuck back!
As the helicopter begins to rise, absolute chaos erupts and all hell breaks loose. Cultists launch themselves into the blades, dragging the helicopter out of the sky.
I was blind, but now I see.
You crash, everyone is either dead or kidnapped, and what follows is a frantic, terrifying sprint through the pitch-black Montana woods. You're unarmed, being hunted by cultists with dogs and assault rifles, running for your life until you eventually fly over a bridge and into a river. You're fished out of the water and you eventually wake up locked inside a prepper bunker belonging to a man named Dutch. He patches you up, gives you a gun, and opens the door so you can reclaim the county and take down the Prophet and his disciples. It is a relentless cinematic roller coaster that perfectly establishes the stakes, villains, and sheer insanity of Hope County. Now, before we get to the #1 spot, here's a few honourable mentions that definitely belong on this list, but their intros were just a little bit too long to make the final cut. The eagle-eyed among you may have spotted a reference to the first BioShock game in the introduction, but of the trilogy, the first is not my favourite intro. My favourite is actually the third, BioShock Infinite. A strange and cryptic opening on the stormy seas, followed by scenes of horror and violence, being launched into the stratosphere, apprehensive over what you'll find, only to be greeted by absolute serenity.
Hallelujah.
Twists and turns along the way, and all of that within the first hour. A masterful opening and an absolute gem. Life is Strange is a strange one because it's not necessarily a game I would recommend to many people. Don't get me wrong, it is a good game, but it's not at the top of my list of must-plays. In fact, I can barely remember the plot of it at all. However, one thing that does stand out is the intro. My favourite sci-fi trope of all time is time travel, time loops, and this game introduces that mechanic in a wonderfully cinematic and meaningful way, preventing the death of a classmate. It feels weighty, it feels traumatic, and the performances by the cast in this game really help sell the drama.
Whoa. What the fuck? How can that be? I was in the bathroom. He shot that poor girl. I held up my hand, and then I was back here.
He likely was.
Elden Ring is another game where the context of the gaming landscape when it dropped mattered to the intro very, very much. The game had been hyped to oblivion. Dark Souls was already a cultural phenomenon, and people were desperate for a new one. In comes Elden Ring, promising a Dark Souls like you'd never seen before. Tighter mechanics, smoother motions, and a sprawling open world. That exit from the catacombs for the first time is one of the best gaming moments ever because you knew you were in for an absolute spectacle. At last, the final one. And it's going to be a long one. Now, if I'm ever going to make a video about the best of anything, Outer Wilds will never not be on that list. That's a convoluted way of saying this is my favorite game of all time. If there was any segment of this video I think you should skip, it would be this one. Because if you know nothing, Jon Snow, about Outer Wilds, please do not watch this section. Go and buy the game, regardless of its price, and consume it. Consider that your spoiler warning for the first hour of this absolute masterpiece. After waking up and witnessing some sort of distant explosion, you speak with a nearby alien who tells you today's the day you launch into space as the planet's newly qualified astronaut. They tell you to head up to the observatory to retrieve the launch codes so you can get access to your ship and blast off. After heading into the nearby settlement and chatting with a number of the locals, embarking on a few short side quests, learning about the different tools at your disposal, and coming to terms with the sheer size of your planet, you make your way into the observatory, finding a new exhibition piece, a Nomai statue. You browse the collection of artifacts in the museum and learn how to use your Nomai text translator, head up top, grab the launch codes, and head on out. Now, I am skipping over a massive amount of lore and backstory here for two reasons. One, go and play the game, and two, there's so much here that this video would double in length. As you head out of the museum, the Nomai statue turns towards you, opens its eyes as if it's alive, plays back the past 30 minutes of everything you've just done, and that's it. Not really understanding what just happened, you press on towards your ship with some general guidance to head toward your planet's moon, the Atoll Rock. After punching in the launch codes and hopping into your ship, you suit up, hop into the pilot seat, open the map, and set course. After a careful landing, you look up to see your home planet and a strange small moon in its orbit. Strange considering when you check the map, the only moon your planet had was the one you're currently standing on. You head outside for a better look, and the moon has vanished. Bewildered but not equipped to deal with such a mystery just yet, you follow the sound of someone whistling and come across a gent called Esker. They tell you that the other astronauts currently in space are all talented musicians, and you can locate them by pointing your signal scope into space and following the sound of their instruments. Esker advises that the best spot to hear these songs are from the North Pole, so that's where you head next. Once at the North Pole, you start flicking through pages of Esker's log, and something on day 70 catches your eye. Something strange is coming from Timber Hearth, your home planet. Day 76 reveals the concern. The log notes that the sound coming from Timber Hearth sounds exactly like Feldspar's harmonica, Feldspar being another astronaut who disappeared in space ages ago. So surely it can't be them. As if it were planned, you aim your signal scope into space and hear that sound of Feldspar's harmonica. Only you're not looking at Timber Hearth, you're looking at a planet that's been completely destroyed. You spin around, find your home, and lo and behold, the same harmonica is playing loud and clear. After this, you head to the South Pole and find what appears to be a giant compass. The way it works is whatever planet you pick on the floor, the compass will point at that planet. You test it out on the planets in your solar system and then select the final one, a strange looking purple symbol, one you've seen before. The compass doesn't land anywhere, it just continues to spin and spin. You head down the stairs and start translating some ancient Nomai text. The writings explain that the compass above is a specific piece of equipment built by the Nomai, an ancient civilization, in an effort to locate something called the Eye of the Universe. Unfortunately, the compass wasn't sensitive enough to find it. The Nomai decided they need to build a much larger version of the locator and agreed the best place for this would be the South Glacier on Brittle Hollow. You also find a tape recording of one of your fellow astronauts saying the exact same thing. They managed to translate what you just read and so headed to Brittle Hollow. You quickly hop back into your ship, set course, and blast off. Right, we're nearly done, I promise. Brittle Hollow is exactly as its name describes. Its surface structure is brittle and breaking to pieces, and the inside of the planet is completely hollow. After landing on the South Pole, you find your fellow astronaut Rybek's ship, and in the entrance to the giant glass dome, which has been destroyed, denying you access, you find another recording. Rybek suggests they may have found another way in and says they're heading to the planet's equator to find a way down. After zooming over to a small village, you find Rybek's campsite and some notes explaining they'd found a way down in a nearby ruin. You follow suit, and sure enough, there's a straightforward path to a lower surface. Nearby, you can hear the sound of another instrument and realize Rybek isn't far. After a brief catch-up with the large traveler who is terrified of space, they start to tell you about all the different sights worth seeing on this planet, including the black hole housed in the planet's core. Not so hollow after all. All of a sudden, the atmosphere changes and the music starts to overwhelm you. I'm going to let this final scene play out. Go and play the game. Anyway, that's my list of the best intros in gaming history. Thank you very much for watching. If you're not subscribed already to the channel, please consider subscribing. We're nearly at 1,000 subscribers. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my takes or not and what intros stand out to you. I'd love to hear it. Many thanks, peace, and God bless. Goodbye.